Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live stream event inside the Cloud Storage Index. I'm Lily McIntyre, and I'm Wasabi's digital content specialist, if you haven't seen me already, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all. So today we have a super special session lined up as we dive deep into the future of cloud storage and what it means for businesses and IT professionals around the globe. So joining me today is a very special guest. You may have also seen him on live streams or our webinars before. That is Andrew Smith, who is our Senior Manager of Strategy and Market Intelligence at Wasabi. Andrew, how's it going?
Good. Great to be here. Thank you for having me, as always. Really excited to talk to you about the Cloud Storage Index today.
For sure. And just for some context, Andrew has really been at the forefront of our latest research initiative, which is leading the charge on the Wasabi 2024 Cloud Storage Index. This comprehensive report is based on insights from 1,200 IT decision makers worldwide, and it sheds light on the evolving landscape of cloud storage, the challenges organizations face, and also the strategic decisions that they're making to navigate the space. So, as I said before, Andrew, it's fantastic to have you with us here today. So today we're looking forward to unpacking the key findings of the Cloud Storage Index. We'll explore how cloud storage continues to be an essential ingredient in modern IT infrastructure environments, the reasons behind the increase in cloud storage volumes and spending, and also the complexities that organizations encounter in managing their cloud storage solutions. Before we get started, just to our audience, we encourage you to engage with us throughout the session. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll just address as many as we can as we go. So without further ado, let's get started. I want to hear Andrew talk. I'm sick of hearing myself. Let's uncover some insights from the 2024 Wasabi Global Cloud Storage Index. Andrew, over to you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, you do have a question? Because I can start talking whenever.
Yeah, as much as I would love that, I'm going to, I just have to ask this question. Anyway, can you give us some background on the Cloud Storage Index, the purpose of the research project, and why Wasabi produces this research analysis?
Yeah. So, and to our viewers, feel free to ask questions at any time, and we'll interrupt each other and answer them. But if people aren't familiar with this type of research project or initiative, I'll give you some background. I come from the analyst side of the market. I worked with Forrester and IDC previously, and the goal with the Cloud Storage Index was to create informative, credible, thought-provoking piece of research on the cloud storage market with a focus on cloud object storage, right? Obviously, that's what Wasabi does. That's our main service. That is our purpose for existing. You've probably seen some research projects like this from other vendors. Veeam has a really good one. They do a state of ransomware report, and they also have like a backup and data protection report that they do annually. Nutanix has a report similar to this. So there are other vendors who produce this similar type of research. We're doing it with a spin, just focus on cloud storage. So we rely on a third party to help us field the survey and collect those results from the 1,200 respondents. So we want the data to be as kind of independent and accurate as possible. It's not Wasabi surveying our customers and telling you what we think you should know about the market. This is an independent piece of research. Wasabi's interpreting the results, but all the respondents are vetted. In fact, the vast majority of the respondents are not Wasabi customers.
Right,
yeah, which is what we want. We want a representative sample of the market. So that's kind of why we do the research, right? It's to be to provide some credible, trustworthy results on the market and fill a gap in that kind of area of intelligence when it comes to cloud storage.
Great answer. In fact, I shouldn't have even had my brain fart a couple minutes ago, but I appreciate you bearing with me through that. I'm also curious just to know why organizations are planning to increase their cloud storage volumes and spending in 2024, because that was a big takeaway from the
big finding. Yeah. Headline result. So for 2 years. Oh, also, I should mention this is the second year we've done this.
Oh, yeah.
So there was the 2023 Cloud Storage Index inaugural, this year we got the 2024 one. So we were able to trend some data year over year this time, or with this iteration. And this has been a big headline for 2 years. Is we asked two questions. At the outset of the survey, we asked respondents if they expect their cloud storage capacity to increase or decrease over the next year, and also if they expect their cloud storage budgets to increase or decrease over the next year. So this year, over 90% of respondents said increase to both questions. So capacity and budgets, 90%, more than 90% increasing. And that's actually an accelerated, or it's an increased percentage compared to last year. It was about 84% of respondents who said last year that they expect to increase. So when you get 90% incidence rate in a survey, it's pretty impressive.
Very
So
significant.
it's a good measure of the health of the market in terms of growth, and expansion of budgets, expansion of storage capacity in the cloud, and then comparing it to last year, where it was even an increase over an already high result of 84%. That's kind of like another great indicator of the way that enterprises, organizations are thinking about cloud storage. It seems to me, based on the results, it's pretty clear that they're happy to increase both capacity that they store in the cloud and budgets to pay for that capacity and pay for the associated services that come along with having more storage in the cloud. So it's kind of a win-win from a market perspective.
For sure, for sure. I mean, my biggest takeaway after reading through the report myself was that cloud is the future, and it's not going away anytime soon. So it's really interesting to hear. My next question for you is, how do organizations perceive the complexity of managing their cloud storage environments, which includes tech and billing/fee structures, that, as we know, was highlighted in the 2024 Cloud Storage Index?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time asking questions around, challenges, complexity, what drives purchase decisions. And I guess I should take a moment to give a shout out to where all this content lives. So you can download an executive summary of the findings at wasabi.com. Just search for the Cloud Storage Index and you'll be able to put in just your contact info, get a printout of the executive summary, which has a lot of this detail. But even then, we don't capture all the detail in that executive summary. We ask a bunch of different questions. So sometimes just having conversations like these and getting Q&A from the audience is a good way to dive into some of the details too. But let's talk a little bit about challenges.
Yeah.
So I think the key finding for me is the ongoing challenge associated with pricing structures and fees in our market.
Right.
We asked two interesting questions. One is we have respondents estimate the proportion of their billing for cloud storage split between stored capacity, so like the dollar per gigabyte rate you might be paying, and the fees that you're paying on that data. So that could be anything from egress, which is the most popular one, but also like the more mundane day-to-day stuff like API charges, data access charges, retrievals, all that stuff that goes into the fee structure. We ask respondents to kind of give us a split, capacity versus fees. And it's almost 50-50, which is crazy.
It's insane.
Yeah. And it was almost 50. So to be exact, it's 42% stored capacity, 47% storage fees. And then there's like a smidge of 1%, less than 1% on other. We have like an other category.
Yeah.
But for all intents and purposes, it's pretty much split 50-50. Last year it was the same. So it really didn't move that much. It's not like things got materially better or the mix of fees declined significantly over just 1 year. So to me, I mean, what else in B2B solutions or IT do you pay that kind of mix on? It just seems unsustainable, maybe even unfair from a buyer perspective, from a service provider perspective. If they have cloud storage as part of their infrastructure, those fees are just eating into their margins. It's affecting how they price their services to end users. A lot of bad stuff, right? This is kind of a negative or very negative way to look at the market, but I think we are obviously Wasabi doesn't charge any of these fees, but it's also shining a light. This is a very hard thing to calculate for organizations to calculate. Their infrastructure billing can be so complex that it's almost difficult for them to understand these proportions on a month-to-month basis. So by providing kind of a overall summer market level proportion like this, I hope that we're kind of shining light on what is a billing challenge in our
Right.
market.
Right. It's also unfortunate to, I'm sure the respondents probably felt this when they were filling out the survey and, indicating what percent of their budget was going to the actual storage and what was going to fees, that because of all these fees, it really tightens their budget. So they don't have the freedom to kind of allocate those resources on other things that actually might help with their business. So,
Yeah.
it must be really unfortunate just from a reader like me, my perspective.
Well, I think that's a great point on how it affects budgets, right? The I think the biggest net effect is that when we follow up in a separate question asking about budgets, we see that again, over 50% of respondents say that they exceeded their budgeted spend on cloud storage last year during 2023. And the fee slice of that pie, I think to your point, is a big reason why those variable costs that sneak into your bills each month or each quarter. It's very difficult for organizations at the outset to say, what are we going to spend on those fees? How do we forecast that over the next year? And more than 50% of them are probably underestimating or getting it wrong and kind of breaking their budget as a result. And when we dug into the data and looked at, we had a segmentation of respondents by how many years they had been using cloud storage. So like if they had adopted in the past year, they're kind of like a new adopter versus people who had been using cloud storage for, I think we went out to like 10 plus years. Those respondents who had adopted cloud storage in the past 1 to 2 years, 72% of them exceeded their budget, right? So you
Wow.
can see the problem kind of gets more difficult, or the problem is even more acute for those less mature adopters, newer adopters, whatever you want to call them. Clearly, it takes a while to understand how budget matches up to billing, and it's only kind of overly the complexity is only increased by how these fee structures work.
Yeah, I can only imagine how hard it must be to predict what your budget's gonna be based on, what you're gonna be spending. But, I mean, it's clear that, cloud storage budgets will be increasing. Surprise, surprise. So I'd love to talk about that and what are some of the key drivers behind budget growth.
Um, so we there's there's an interesting. This takes a little bit of setup. I'm kind of like, all right, how do we start?
Ooh,
So there's an
take your time.
industry, interesting industry trend happening with cloud object storage. We asked a question this year about data usage on a
Mhm.
scale of cold to hot. Is a lot. That's how a lot of buyers think about their stored data. Like hot being, I need really low latency. It's going to be accessed on an hourly, minute by minute basis, and cold being, I might access it once a year or once every couple of years, but it's going to be retained for forever, and it needs to be as cheap as possible.
Yeah.
So we asked respondents to estimate what proportion of their stored object data fell on that spectrum from hot to cold. And what we saw was a large proportion of it, almost 50% of it, sits in that kind of like warm to cool range.
Oh, okay.
So what surprised me was that the cold segment, right, the far cold, low cost, low access end of the spectrum was only like 18, 20%. And then there was a bunch of stuff in that warm to cool segment, and there was stuff, and then there was a good amount of data in the hot segment too. So it's a long-winded way of saying that organizations are doing more with their object storage. We don't have year-over-year data for this, but kind of just from my experience watching the market over the past 5-6 years, knowing what we know and then getting this data back, it kind of indicates to me that object storage is being applied to a wider range of use cases. And that has an effect on budgets, right? So I'm finally getting back to trying to answer your question. But that's
No,
that's
this was an excellent way to go about it. Props to you.
that's a big part of what's influencing budget is the need or the desire for organizations to do more with their object storage, not just back it up, not just use it for backup copies, not just use it for long-term archive, but apply it to more primary workloads, right? They're architecting quote unquote cloud native applications with object storage as the primary tier, which is awesome, right? It's kind of like the next evolution of our market. If you're a storage nerd, it's interesting, right? It's interesting how these dynamics change over time. And I think we got some really cool data to help inform that change in this year's Cloud Storage Index.
Yeah, I think backup is really just the tip of the iceberg these days. But even looking beyond that, there were some other major themes, one of those being artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning, which these days have been influencing or starting to influence organizations' cloud storage strategies. So could you talk to us a little bit more about what you found and what the big AI takeaways are in the Cloud Storage Index?
Yeah. So we do themes every year from a survey perspective. And this year, one of the big themes was AI ML, obviously, because it's everywhere. You can't, right?
You can't escape it.
Can't escape it. But what we wanted to put a storage spin on it, right? So we wanted to learn about adoption drivers and challenges from a storage perspective. So like, what are your challenges as you think about adoption of AI and ML technologies or services? What are the storage challenges your organization faces? That's kind of the angle we were taking, because I think what we're like the hypothesis that I have with adoption of AI ML technology is it's kind of like all these trends we've talked about for the past several years around accessibility of data across core, cloud, and edge ecosystems, and the need to be able to secure and access your data in hybrid and multi-cloud environments, right? All the crazy infrastructure buzzwords you can think about are coming home to roost because of AI ML, right? Organizations need visibility of their data, secure data, accessible data to do the AI ML workload or application or right the goal. All of these things are a means to an end for an AI ML application. So that's kind of like we wanted to try to get some insight into that process, what organizations are thinking about. In terms of workloads, so we did ask about like, what are you adopting? What are the solutions that you're looking to AI ML to solve or to implement AI ML technologies for? And no surprises, generative AI was at the top of the list, as you might imagine, due to the hype. But after that, we actually saw a lot of organizations say that they're doing implementing AI ML technology for security and compliance. So things like advanced anomaly detection, advanced threat detection and alerting, so cool stuff like that, and computer vision, right? So computer vision is kind of a range of all things image and video processing and recognition. Think of like facial recognition or like event processing, even I'm blanking on the term, but you get the idea. Computer vision.
Yeah.
Big.
Actually, speaking of computer vision, our CEO, Dave Friend, actually posted a really interesting article on this with some pretty timely computer vision news on his LinkedIn, if you want to check it out.
So check that out because he'll explain it in a way that's much more eloquent than me. So then, those are workloads, right? No surprises. But when we asked about challenges, we did get some cool results. So top two infrastructure top two cloud storage related challenges related to AI ML workload adoption were the requirements to store data across a wider variety of locations. So again, think of like edge and core and cloud and that connectivity. And then number two was the requirement, new or increasing storage migration and movement requirements, especially in like hybrid and multi-cloud architectures. So it's about storing more data across a wider set of environments, not just cloud from a Wasabi perspective, right? That could mean on-premises and edge too, and then moving and migrating that data across those environments. I guess you could interpret that from like it needs to be cost effective, it needs to be timely and accurate, it needs to be organized and operationalized. But again, really it's about like enabling data, enabling access to data, movement of data across your infrastructure environments. We love that story from a Wasabi perspective because we're S3 compatible, we're object storage, we integrate with leading compute providers, leading backup providers, leading database providers. We want to be that connective tissue kind of under, that connective infrastructure tissue from a storage perspective that allows all of that data access and mobility to happen cost effectively. And I guess that's kind of, those were the key takeaways from AI ML. It was not like nothing, it wasn't so much an epiphany as it was just kind of reiterating a lot of the stuff that we had talked about over the past couple of years in terms of how infrastructure needs to evolve. But it's great to see that new technologies, right, novel solutions like AI ML based applications and services are driving that need at a much accelerated rate. And I think that's going to be the big change is kind of, again, we've been talking about it for years, but now we need to do it because we've got AI ML adoption goals to meet. Every organization does.
Yes, for sure. I think at Wasabi, something that we really pride ourselves on is, giving you the freedom to do what you want with your data, freedom to migrate it, what have you. But I think the integration of AI ML is really helping us broaden our horizons in defining what is freedom with your data. Like, what does that mean to you? So I'm definitely excited for the future. And if you're curious to learn more about Wasabi and AI, we actually just acquired Curio AI from Gray Meta. And stay tuned for some very exciting news coming with that, because Wasabi and AI, we know that it's the future, and we're hopping on the train too. I don't know if you have anything to add on that front, Andrew.
No, there will be a lot coming out in the next couple of weeks, obviously, with that acquisition, how it's being productized. But again, I would refer back to, I think Dave Friend has written a couple good posts about, his vision for object storage and all things AI and analytics, right? Making your data smarter, making it easier to access, automating those manual processes so you can actually get to the outcomes that you want. And then, like you mentioned, most importantly, organizations don't need to be punished for doing the analytics and the processing and the moving of this data. That stuff should just kind of be table stakes, and you don't need to be nickel and dimed for all of that. And that's really the philosophy behind what we're doing with Wasabi and Curio.
Yeah, giving you some freedom back. Before I ask my next question, just an additional plug for questions. If we're talking about something you hear Andrew make a point that you want to hear more about, feel free to just drop your questions below and we'll be able to see them and answer them as we go. So highly encourage that, because audience participation is always fun.
Yeah,
And,
or questions on the survey, if anything on how we did the survey methodology, happy to answer those. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please. And then the last thing is the Cloud Storage Index it's a really comprehensive report. If you don't want to dive in just yet, you just want to dip your toes, you actually wrote a really cool article on our blog, The Bucket, which explains a couple of key takeaways. So if you want to learn more, but you don't want to just go all in and download the whole report just yet, I highly recommend checking that out. It was really nice for me just when I was learning about the report itself for the first time to have that kind of intro level context. So I don't know if there's anything that you talked about in that bucket article that we haven't covered yet, if you would like to give a little preview for folks, but totally up to you.
I think we probably only data point we haven't covered was, let me make sure it's in the blog before I promise it's in there and I'm wrong.
Sorry,
Satisfaction.
for
No,
context, I really put Andrew on the spot for that one.
satisfaction was the only data point I think we did not cover. So, your typical CSAT stuff, we didn't ask about satisfaction. So this is kind of like end user buyer satisfaction with cloud storage services. We didn't ask about this last year in 2023. We asked about it this year, and you can see the full data on the bucket post. But it was really interesting. We did like a standard CSAT scale from very unsatisfied to completely satisfied, and 90% of respondents, so out of 1,200, 90% of them said that they're satisfied with their cloud object storage service, which is great.
That's great.
From a service provider perspective. I think it's also an interesting, it kind of, I think there's inherently a high level of satisfaction with cloud storage services, right? In terms of what we do. And this might not be obvious to someone who's coming from an on-prem managed storage system or solution. But when you move to the cloud, you get, you don't have to worry about doing all the manual processes on things like compression and access and connecting all the networking components of your systems and making sure that they're backed up and accessible and monitoring your own downtime, right? All that is taken care of by the cloud service provider. And I think that lends to a high level of satisfaction because it's basically set it and forget it, or buy it and forget it. Or, you can do things like replicate, but other than that, you're watching, you have SLAs for uptime and resilience and durability. And that's all, it's a great, just inherent benefit of the cloud service market in general. And Wasabi's dedicated to meeting or exceeding all of those kind of industry standards. So leads to a high level of satisfaction. Awesome. We compared this to Wasabi's customers, actually. So we polled over 100 Wasabi customers, separate survey, on the same scale of satisfaction. And Wasabi actually came out, so 92% of those over 100 respondents said satisfied, which is great. So in a market where high satisfaction is kind of the bar, the expectation, we see that Wasabi is meeting and slightly exceeding that kind of market rate, which to us, it's a great indication of Wasabi's success, Wasabi's maturity, right? We're not just an early stage startup anymore. We're kind of in growth mode. Yeah, exactly. We've grown up. So it's a cool story around the satisfaction numbers, and I'm glad we gathered that data this year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's nice when you move to the cloud. I love how you said the set it and forget it approach, because then you have the freedom, you have the time to focus on other things that might be more meaningful or, I guess, lucrative to your organization in the long run. So that's obviously, I'm here at Wasabi. I'm a big proponent of the cloud, but I think that's just another reason why. One of my final questions for you. What plans do organizations have when it comes to leveraging cloud storage for surveillance-related workloads?
So another theme this year was surveillance. We wanted to get some more market data on how enterprises are looking at storage-related surveillance requirements, and that dovetails with kind of the overall physical security technology market as well. I think we were pleasantly surprised to see how high the adoption rate of cloud storage is for video surveillance today. So the majority, like I think more than 80% of our respondents said that they use cloud storage for video surveillance today, but it's not even close to making up the majority of the market when we look at capacity. So I think I'm kind of extrapolating from the results here, but what we see is a lot of enterprises are using storage for cloud storage for surveillance, but it's not a high proportion of capacity yet. So
It's
there's
still
still
early.
this, it's early, there's still this, I think, migration and shift that's happening in that market, because when we look at the proportions, about only 30% today, 35% to be exact, of stored capacity for surveillance is in public cloud. Everything else is in more traditional dedicated systems, private cloud, um, all that good stuff. So you kind of get the idea here. There's high adoption rate, but probably low capacity on like a user to user basis. But we expect that to trend towards much higher growth over the next year, over the next 3 to 5 years. And the cool thing is with surveillance, we kind of asked enterprises like, what are the, so high adoption, right? Great. But what are the drivers that are leading your organization to use public cloud storage for their video surveillance data? And we got a good list of reasons. So performance in terms of data access and latency was actually number one.
That's
And
great to hear.
and stronger data security was number two. And it's, to me, it's almost ironic, because if you had asked that question about anything related to cloud storage like 5, 6 years
Forget it.
ago, yeah, no one would have trusted the security and performance that they got out of cloud storage. And now we can see with these more emerging workloads or higher growth workloads that it's flipped on its head, right? That buyer perception is, enterprises, organizations know that they're going to get, in many cases, better performance, better data security and resilience using cloud storage than they would on premises. And again, if we think back to what you said about kind of offloading that operational burden and all the complexity of just underlying infrastructure, you can kind of forget about it, right? You know that you're going to get a service that meets or exceeds your expectations.
Very exciting. Well, I'm specifically excited to see what the future of surveillance in the cloud looks like, but I guess we shall see when we see. I guess on that note, I'm excited to see the data in coming years. We have a question that asks, will the cloud storage index be a trilogy like Star Wars?
I sure hope so. Yes. So we're planning to do the 2025 Cloud Storage Index, because unlike Star Wars, where sometimes they do prequels that weaken the franchise, we hope that
I love the prequels, but that's just me.
we hope that, yeah, I shouldn't have said that, because now I'll get in an argument over Star Wars, and it's not a good idea. But
I
I hope
from.
that the sequels for the Cloud Storage Index will only make it stronger, because we get that trend data. And when we talk about survey data, trending over 1 year is great, but trending over 1, 2, 3, 5 years, that becomes really powerful, because then we can start to make like more forecast predictions, look back at history, and try to make some more accurate predictions about the way that the market's moving. So yeah, we'll be doing 2025 as long as I can. I'll do anything I can in my power to make that happen, and we'll be excited to bring those results to you guys next year.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, before we wrap up, any final thoughts on the Cloud Storage Index?
No, I guess we covered the highlights. I guess if I were to leave a parting
word,
it would be, go check out the Bucket article, go check out the landing page on wasabi.com, download the executive summary. If you have comments on the data, feel free to reach out. I think we have contact information in the executive summary. We're always looking for feedback, for areas to improve, areas to think about for next year's survey, right? Topical areas. So please engage with the data. That's what it's there for, and use it in your day-to-day, right? If you're building the business case for cloud storage, you should have a high level of confidence in this data.
Fantastic. And we will link all of the resources that we talked about on this live stream today in the comments of the live stream. to make it accessible. But I mean, that's all I have for today. But thank you so much to all who joined us, engaged. And again, huge thanks to Andrew for bringing his knowledge and insight on this really cool project to this live stream.
My pleasure. Thank you again for having me, Lily.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.